Welcome back to Secret Weapons. My name is Mark Johnston. If this is your first time here, this is a YouTube channel where we do gear demos and reviews, as well as studio tips and tricks for leveling up your writing, playing, and production from the perspective of a guitar player working out of a studio. If that's the kind of thing that would appeal to you, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button and stick around for future videos. And today we are taking a look at the long-ish awaited update to the Cali76 stacked compressor. So last year on the channel, we covered the massive update to the Cali76 compact and Cali76 compact bass, which featured a brand new, smaller housing, streamlined power requirements, the inclusion of a robust VU meter, and just a bunch of under the hood quality of life improvements, including but not limited to lower noise floor and better headroom. The bass version of the Cali76 has not left my bass pedal board since its release. It has become a staple of every single track I do, including the one today. And earnestly, about 70% of my compressor use in terms of pedal boards these days is the Cali76 FET Compact. I have been really impressed with both of those compressors since their release. But a really interesting thing that's happened over the last year or so is I have been putting a lot less compression on everything on this channel. I will still use compressors, but they are no longer always on devices for me. In general, I've been finding that I try to use lighter compression when I do use it at all on the pedal board. I still use a lot of compression in my DAW, but I've been trying to focus less and less on heavy compression at all gain stages in my workflow, from playing to final mixing. And to that end, the Cali76 Stacked Edition is a really interesting release because this flies in the face of all of that less compression ethos I have been leaning into. And I'm actually really grateful for that because I feel like I got a little too comfortable leaning away from compression. And this has been a really good example of how you can take a lot of compression and instead of making it feel like something that you accidentally did or heavy compression as a coping mechanism for something else, the stacked version of the Cali76 brings you heavy compression as a feature, not a bug, as a sense of bravado, not a sense of insecurity in your playing. For those of you who've never used the original Cali76 stacked, the control scheme here is pretty simple and pretty straightforward. Much like its contemporaries, the Cali76 Compact and Compact Bass, you have an identical top row of knobs here. You've got your input gain, your output gain, and your dry. Input and output are going to be the in and out stages of an 1176, both here and in your rack 76s as well, because a Cali76 is based on an 1176 compressor, which has a fixed threshold built into the compressor. And so to achieve compression, you increase that input gain until the point where your signal starts passing above the threshold for compression, and then it compresses. The output is going to be how loud that compressed signal comes out the other side of that device. It is a very simple system for compression, but is one of the kind of most versatile and famous instances of compression in the world. Different from the racks, however, you also have a dry control in here, which is basically the ability to parallel blend analog dry-through signal in this device. So you turn up that dry to get parallel uncompressed signal alongside your compressed signal. And the beauty there is, especially with an 1176, but compression in general can get pretty aggressive. And this device is designed for aggressive compression. So being able to dial in some of that dry brings things like your natural pick attack and the transients back into your signal. We're gonna take it in and out throughout my sound samples, and we'll really kind of put a really fine point on why that dry parallel is valuable in a device like this for an instrument like guitar. But where the stacked edition deviates really heavily from the other Cali76 compacts from origin is typically on the bottom row here, you would have a ratio knob, attack knob, and a release knob. And instead, you have two 1176s built into this device. And the workflow is really interesting. Input gain drives your guitar input signal into the first compressor, which has both a fixed threshold like we discussed, but also a fixed ratio. So to shape that compression, what you have instead is a single knob that goes between a fast attack and a slow release, and a slow attack and a fast release, which is the speed at which compression is applied to your dry signal once it has passed above that threshold. You can tell what is being compressed because on the right side underneath that knob right there, there is a jewel that will light up and get brighter and dimmer based on how much compression is being applied to your signal. And then in the middle, you have this little golden or bronze knob, and this is your through. So your dry signal comes in, is set by your input gain, and passes through compressor number 1. Compressor number 1 then outputs to this through, where you set how much compression goes to your second full compressor in this device with its own fast, slow attack release knob, and then out to your output knob. So what this essentially means is you have two compressors in series in this device. And the consequences of that are really interesting because it gives you a ton of compression on tap if you want it. Like we're talking endless sustain, like lap steel style compression, or the ability to dial the first compressor really hard and the second compressor softer, or vice versa, to set different attack and release speeds on both. It just gives you such a wide gamut of compression options, from subtle compression to heavy compression, from fast and slow to singing sustain to choppy and quick. If you're into compressors like I am, this is a really interesting device to take a look at. And it's especially interesting if you're into some really great screaming vintage tones, because this idea of two 1176s in series is not something that Origin came up with whole cloth. This is actually an homage to a famous implementation of two 1176s by bands like Zeppelin. So there's some massive aspirational and now attainable sounds in a device like this for those of you looking for that kind of singing endless sustain sound. All that to say, I think that this is better heard than talked about. So let's plug in my really low output vintage Fender Mustang and hear how a device like this can really bolster something like that. And then let's swap over to my PRS Custom 22, a high output, super low noise guitar, and really push the absolute limits of singing sustain that the Cali76 Stacked Edition offers. So as always, before we get into our sound samples, let's talk through our signal chain and the context we are working in. I am playing my 1972 Fender Competition Mustang into the Origin Effects Cali76 Stacked Edition. We're running into our amplifier, which is the Morgan PR12, and then onward to a pair of Warm Audio 273 preamps and recording into Universal Audio's Luna DAW. With the Cali76 bypassed, this is our dry tone. So as you can hear, this Mustang has a really pleasant and beautiful sound. These pickups are great, but this early 70s Mustang does not have a lot of volume output and struggles to stand up in a mix without the aid of some combination of boosting, compression, and other gain staging to get it to stand up straight in a mix, be that ambient or otherwise. So let's go ahead and turn on the Cali76 Stacked Edition. We have dry at 2 o'clock, meaning we should be at a unity gain when we engage the pedal, and then we will start dialing up the input gain to increase our compression. As you can see, neither of the jewels on either side are lighting up right now, and that is because the input gain is at 0, meaning we are not driving the first gain stage whatsoever, or the first compression stage whatsoever, and the through is at minimum as well, meaning that what does get into this stage is not passing through to the second stage. Let's go ahead and start dialing in some parallel compression by increasing this input gain knob. As you can hear, we're also getting more volume out of this as well. So let's go ahead and dial back our dry tone and kind of supplement that volume with our compressed signal. One of the tricks to getting some great sounds out of this without overdriving your amp is going to be realizing very quickly that as you increase that input gain, you're going to have to decrease both the output of the compressed signal and the dry, even more so as we start to dial up this through control right here, because this thing will put out a lot of volume very quickly. So we've now taken out the dry completely, so we are only hearing the compressed signal by itself. And these current settings of no dry signal and only pretty heavily compressed at this point with the amount of input gain we have is a great opportunity to take a look at this speed control right here. So there is no ratio control as we've touched on, but instead only the ability to, with a single ganged knob, set a speed for faster attack and slower release, or slower attack and faster release on each of the two compression stages. So with the slightly higher compression response right now that we're experiencing, let's go ahead and give a listen to that kind of single stage speed control. Faster attack, slower release. As you can hear, you're getting that kind of classic squawky, squishy sound from the compressor right now. Characterized by really aggressive onset when you haven't let the ratio let up, or when you haven't let the compressor let up fully. You can find more kind of gentle ratios in there as well. It's worth noting that that really fast attack and slow response is great in a parallel environment for more natural attack from the dry control itself, as well as longer and more exaggerated sustain from the slow let off of the compressor. And on the other side, we have our slower attacks and our faster releases. Which again is good if you want, once again with parallel, something that feels a little bit more naturalistic, where you don't feel any of that squash even in the background of the compressor, and you reduce the amount of bloom that the compressor will provide as well, because the gate lets go so quickly. Another good use case for this is when you're doing things like tremolo picking or really angular guitar parts. Having a compressor that takes a little bit longer to grab your signal and lets go a lot more quickly allows you to keep more of the transient in your pick attack present in your music. You can really hear the difference in the amount of body between those two. But once again, the nice thing about this is the happy medium is usually the answer. Now let's go ahead and start bringing in that second layer of compression. Let's take both speed parameters, attack and release parameters, to noon, and start and bring down the amount that we're sending in a little bit. can hear right off the bat, we start getting a lot more volume. Both knobs at noon, you can hear the difference. An important note as we start to do this, because you are only getting the compressed signal from stage 1 transferred on through this through control to stage 2, the shape of your attack and release on this first one is going to inform the energy and the transient and the body and the sustain that presses into the second compressor. Meaning that if you do something like impart a really fast attack and slow release on the first stage, the loss of transient on that first stage will be reflected in how much of the pick attack lands on the second stage. So if we play like a nice consistent note, you'll note it's subtle, but in that second light, you can see that we are getting more frequent triggerings of compression on that second stage in the slow attack, fast release mode, because more of your transient is passing through to the second signal, meaning that the second gain stage is receiving more pick attack, more transient information than it would if you set it to really clamp down on that first stage. So let's go ahead and go with a really fast attack, slow response on this first one, and dial that up a little bit more. And now send more of that pick attack onward through. And again, this through control gains up the entire pedal very quickly. But can allow you to create some really aggressive sounds of compression. So let's go with fast attack on both compressors. You can really hear that exaggerated blooming effect as we clamp down on our first compressor and slowly release, and then send that clamped and releasing sound onward to the second one, which is in turn, once again, clamping down on the transient even faster, or not even faster, but doubling down on that and continuing to kind of create a lot of sustain there. And of course, a sound like that is best served parallel blended, especially on a guitar, unless you're really going for that slide guitar sound. Once again, let's do our best to actually signal match the two of those. You can also just hear a lot more body because the low end in this guitar is sustaining harder through those two compression stages. And of course, we are driving into that first stage pretty hard and into that second stage pretty hard. But this thing will give you some really interesting options. Like, let's go ahead and take our first stage compression a little bit more subtle. So we have a fast attack and a slow release on the first one. So we are not grabbing much of the transient, but when we do, we are grabbing it. Very, very little compression happening. And then let's hit that second compressor harder. And even that one out. Sometimes you get a sound like that where those two compression stages sound pretty naturalistic already. And really all you're looking for is a little bit more presence on those particularly heavy downstroke. So like light picking and light playing right here is kind of beautiful and even. But then you really strum down hard, and you can hear that little smack happen, that really kind of heavy squash. Bring in your dry tone again. It's wild what a difference just the sustain that a compressor like this can offer you. And once again, you can kind of bring down the total output of all of that compression happening right there and really just offer up. Let's like take that totally out, bring our dry back in. And just supplement slightly. Okay, so now that we've walked through some of the more subtle settings and kind of medium subtle settings through the lens of taking a low output vintage guitar and imbuing it with a lot of great body and character and how the stacked can be a really good first gain stage for a guitar like that. Let's now take a look at the stacked edition Cali76 and take a look at a guitar like my Paul Reed Smith Custom 22 with bare knuckle pickups. And the reason we have picked this guitar is because it's going to be higher output, but also because it's a good example for more extreme settings on here, because the stacked version of the Cali76 is really, really low noise floor, but a single coil guitar like that Mustang is going to be noisy no matter what in a studio like mine. And this guitar is the lowest noise guitar I have. These pickups are the lowest outputting pickups in terms of a kind of an ambient noise floor. So it's going to let us push more aggressive, slide, hard sustain, hard limiting style compression stages out of this without just turning it into a noisy mess like you heard when we cranked the Cali into that fuzz in the intro song. So here is the neck pickup on my Custom 22. Worth noting that at this point, we are not trying to be super clean with our gain staging in terms of volume. This is not trying to say, look how good this sounds, and then doing the louder is more better trick. This is listen to the kind of exaggerated, ridiculous sustained sounds you can get out of this. So we are not trying to level match for the remainder of this section. This is just going to be whatever volume we get out of the incredible amounts of kind of crazy sustain we get out of here, and however hard we need to hit the amp to get there. This is just the creative output of a more extreme version of the stacked compressor. and crank up our reverb and a little bit more volume and really lean into this. So obviously we're throwing a lot more notes in right now. And so in the interest of making sure that you can tell what's happening with the Cali76 right now relative to what's being played, I'm gonna go ahead and reframe the camera a little bit so that you can see kind of where my pick attack is coming from, what notes are being hammered on versus what notes are being played conventionally, because the benefit of a really exaggerated sound like this is not just slide guitar stuff, but also the ability to go from this to this. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. What is the ideal implementation for you on a compressor like this? And more to the point, how do you use your compressors? Are you somebody who likes a light touch, or is the heavy-handedness and the brick wall nature of something like this appealing to you? I would love to know in those comments down below. And as always, I will see you in the next one.